The apothecary door chimed as Aria Castellan stumbled through it for the third time that week, her hands shaking so badly she could barely hold the prescription her mother's doctor had written in increasingly desperate handwriting. The elderly pharmacist looked up from behind the counter, his expression shifting from professional courtesy to something that resembled pity. Aria hated that look. She'd seen it on too many faces lately. Nurses, bill collectors, the landlord who'd taped another eviction notice to their apartment door just that morning. "Ms. Castellan," he said gently, already reaching for the same amber bottle he'd shown her twice before. "The medication your mother needs. I know how much it costs." Aria's voice came out sharper than she intended. She softened it, clutching her worn purse against her chest. "I just thought maybe there was a generic version, or a payment plan, or there isn't." The pharmacist set the bottle down carefully. "This particular formulation is rare. The disease your mother has, it's not common, and the treatment is, well, it's expensive because so few people need it. The pharmaceutical company that makes it charges what they do because they can." Aria stared at the bottle like it held liquid gold. In a way, it did. It held her mother's life. $6,000 for a month's supply. $6,000 she didn't have, couldn't borrow, and had no way of earning in the 2 days her mother had left before her condition deteriorated past the point of recovery. She'd tried everything. Sold everything she owned of value, which wasn't much. Her laptop, her grandmother's ring, even the car that barely ran anyway. She'd begged the hospital for help, applied for every assistance program that existed. All of it together had gotten her maybe a quarter of what she needed. "Please," she heard herself say, and she hated the crack in her voice. "There has to be something, anything. I'll work it off. I'll sign whatever you want. My mother is dying." The pharmacist's weathered face creased with genuine sorrow. "I'm sorry. I truly am. But I can't just give away medication that costs the store thousands of dollars. I have a business to run, suppliers to pay. If I could help, I would." Aria felt the tears coming and blinked them back furiously. She wouldn't cry. Not here. Not again. She'd save that for the privacy of her mother's hospital room, where she'd have to explain that she'd failed, that despite every promise she'd made, despite working 3 jobs and sleeping 4 hours a night, despite sacrificing everything, it wasn't enough. "Right," she whispered. "Of course, I understand." She turned toward the door, her vision blurring despite her best efforts. The bell chimed again as someone else entered, and Aria barely registered the figure before she collided directly into what felt like a marble statue. Strong hands caught her shoulders, steadying her with effortless strength. Aria looked up and up into the most striking face she'd ever seen. The man was beautiful in a way that didn't seem entirely human, pale skin that looked like porcelain in the apothecary's fluorescent lighting, white hair that fell to his shoulders in a way that should have looked aging, but instead seemed ethereal, otherworldly. His eyes were such a deep crimson they appeared black until the light caught them at the right angle, and his features were sharp and aristocratic, like something carved by a master sculptor. He wore all black an expensive suit that probably cost more than Aria made in 6 months, and he studied her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Forgive me," he said, his voice accented with something old European, though Aria couldn't place exactly what. "I should have been more careful." "No, it was my fault. I wasn't looking." Aria tried to step back, but his hands remained on her shoulders for just a moment longer, his crimson eyes scanning her face with an expression she couldn't read. Then he released her and moved past, approaching the counter with the kind of commanding presence that made even the small apothecary feel like a throne room. Aria should have left, should have walked out the door and gone back to the hospital to begin the impossible conversation with her mother. But something kept her frozen there, watching as the stranger addressed the pharmacist. "I require your complete inventory," he said simply. The pharmacist blinked. "I'm sorry?" "Your inventory, all of it." The stranger, because Aria couldn't think of him as anything else, pulled out a black credit card that seemed to absorb light. "I wish to purchase this establishment's entire stock of medications, supplements, and related materials." The silence that followed was so complete, Aria could hear her own heartbeat. "Sir, I don't think you understand. I understand perfectly." The stranger's voice didn't rise, but something in it made the pharmacist straighten instinctively. "You have medications here that people need. I have more money than I could spend in several lifetimes. This seems like a simple transaction. That would cost, the inventory alone is worth hundreds of thousands of dollars, and that's not even counting. I'm not interested in the count. Name your price. Aria's lips moved before her brain caught up. Wait. The stranger turned, those unsettling crimson eyes fixing on her with laser focus. Up close, she could see that his pupils weren't quite round, and his teeth when he spoke were just slightly too sharp. Everything about him screamed danger, otherness, predator. And yet she couldn't stop herself from speaking. If you're really buying everything, she said, her voice trembling but determined, then that includes my mother's medication, the one I need, the one I was just— She gestured helplessly at the counter. The stranger tilted his head, a gesture that reminded Aria of a bird of prey examining something interesting. You were begging for medicine. It wasn't a question, but Aria nodded anyway, her cheeks burning with shame. And you cannot afford it? No. The word came out barely above a whisper. Something flickered across the stranger's perfect features, interest perhaps, or calculation. Show me which one. Aria's feet moved on autopilot, carrying her back to the counter where the amber bottle still sat. She picked it up with shaking hands, holding it out like an offering. The stranger took it, his cool fingers brushing hers for just a moment. He examined the label with the same intensity he'd examined her face. Rare, he murmured. Expensive. Your mother is fortunate to have someone who would fight so desperately for her life. Not fortunate enough, Aria said bitterly. I can't actually get it for her. The stranger looked at her for a long moment, and Aria felt like those crimson eyes could see straight through to her soul. Then he turned back to the pharmacist. I'll take the entire apothecary, he said. Not just the inventory, the building, the business, everything. Name your price, and do it quickly. The pharmacist's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. Sir, this is insane. Is it? The stranger's lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. You have something I want, and I have something you want. That's the basis of all commerce, is it not? He set the bottle down on the counter between them. Though I confess, my motivation is perhaps more interesting than simple acquisition. He glanced back at Aria, and she felt her heart skip. I have a proposition for you, Miss Castellan. Aria Castellan. Miss Castellan. The stranger's voice wrapped around her name like silk. I will purchase this establishment and everything in it. I will ensure your mother receives not only the medication she needs now, but a lifetime supply, delivered regularly and at no cost to you. Aria's breath caught. What? What do you want? Your company, he said simply. For 1 month, you will stay with me at my residence as my guest. You may leave at any time, but for every day you remain, your mother's medicine continues. At the end of the month, if you've stayed the entire time, the arrangement becomes permanent. She will never want for treatment again. Aria's mind reeled. That's insane. Why would you do that? What do you really want from me? The stranger's expression remained unreadable. Consider it a whim. I am very old, Miss Castellan, and very wealthy, and very bored. You interest me. Your devotion interests me. And I find myself curious to see if that devotion extends to sacrificing a month of your freedom for your mother's life. This is ridiculous, the pharmacist interjected. Young lady, you can't seriously be considering— How do I know you'll keep your word? Aria interrupted, her eyes never leaving the stranger's face. How do I know this isn't just some sick game? You don't, the stranger admitted. You have only my word, which I give you now. I will keep my end of this bargain to the letter. Your mother will receive her medication starting today, this moment, if you agree, and she will continue to receive it for as long as you honor your part of our arrangement. Aria's thoughts raced. This was insane. This was dangerous. This man, if he even was a man, was clearly not normal. Everything about him screamed threat, from his inhuman beauty to his casual discussion of purchasing an entire business on a whim. But her mother was dying, and she had less than 2 days to find a miracle. 1 month, she said slowly. And I can leave whenever I want? Whenever you wish? Though your mother's medication will cease if you do. That's not really a choice. The stranger inclined his head slightly. No. but it's more of a choice than you had 5 minutes ago." He wasn't wrong. Aria closed her eyes, thought of her mother's face, thought of all the promises she'd made at the hospital bedside, thought of what it would mean to fail. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay, yes, I agree." When she opened her eyes, the stranger was watching her with an expression that might have been approval, or hunger, or both. "Excellent." He turned to the pharmacist, pulling out his phone and making a brief call. Within minutes, a woman in an expensive suit arrived with contracts, documentation, and a very large check. The pharmacist looked like he might faint as he signed papers, transferring ownership of the apothecary, the building, and apparently several adjacent properties Aria hadn't even known were part of the deal. Through it all, the stranger stood perfectly still, his attention never wavering from Aria. When the paperwork was complete, he handed the amber bottle to one of several assistants who had materialized from nowhere. "Deliver this to—" He glanced at Aria. "St. Catherine's Hospital, room 417, Aria said numbly. "Aria Castellan." "Immediately," the stranger continued, "and arrange for a lifetime prescription to be established with the hospital's pharmacy. Whatever she needs, whenever she needs it. Cost is irrelevant." The assistant nodded and disappeared. Aria felt like she was in a dream, or a nightmare. She wasn't sure which. The stranger offered her his arm with old-fashioned courtesy. "Shall we?" I should go to the hospital first. Tell my mother. The medication will arrive before we would, and you'll need time to think of an explanation that won't alarm her." Those crimson eyes glinted. "Unless you plan to tell her the truth? That you've sold yourself to a stranger for a month in exchange for her life?" Aria flinched. Put that way, it sounded even worse than it was. "I'll think of something," she muttered, taking his arm because her legs felt too shaky to walk on their own. His skin was cold through the expensive fabric of his suit jacket. Not corpse cold, but definitely cooler than human body temperature should be. Another piece of wrongness to add to the growing pile. "What's your name?" she asked as he guided her toward the door. "Dorian," he said. "Though I've gone by many names over the years, you may call me whatever you wish." "Just Dorian? No last name?" His lips curved into that not-quite smile again. Somnus. Dorian Somnus. Though the surname is more of a recent affectation than a family name. Dorian Somnus. Aria turned the name over in her mind as he led her to a car that probably cost more than her entire apartment building. A driver held the door open, and she slid into leather seats so soft they felt like butter. Dorian settled beside her with inhuman grace, and the car pulled away from the curb. "Where are we going?" Aria asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "My home. You'll want to collect your belongings first, I assume." Aria almost laughed. "I don't have much. My apartment is—" She stopped, realizing she didn't know if she should tell this strange man where she lived. "I already know where you live, Miss Castellan," Dorian said mildly, as if reading her thoughts. "I know quite a lot about you, actually. I've been watching you for several days now." That should have been terrifying. It probably was terrifying. But Aria was too numb to process one more impossible thing. "Why?" she asked instead. "Because you kept coming back." Dorian turned slightly to look at her, and in the car's dim interior, his eyes seemed to glow faintly. "3 times you went to that apothecary, and 3 times you left empty-handed. But you never stopped trying, never gave up. That kind of devotion is rare and valuable. So you decided to buy an entire business just to see if you could manipulate me into staying with you for a month. That's insane." "Yes," Dorian agreed, "but I am very old, as I said, and the normal methods of courtship bore me." Aria's head snapped toward him. "Courtship? This isn't— you can't seriously—" "Can't I?" Dorian's expression remained placid. "I find you fascinating, Aria Castellan. I wish to know you better. Is that not the foundation of courtship? Normal people ask someone out for coffee. I am not normal people." That was becoming increasingly clear. Aria pressed her hands to her face, trying to organize her spinning thoughts. "What are you exactly? Because you're definitely not human." Dorian was quiet for a moment, and when Aria lowered her hands, she found him studying her with that unnerving intensity again. "No," he said finally. "I am not human. I haven't been for a very, very long time." "Vampire," Aria said flatly. It should have sounded ridiculous, like something from a bad movie. But looking at him, the pale skin, the crimson eyes, the two sharp teeth, the impossible beauty, it was the only thing that made sense. Yes, the simple confirmation sent chills down Aria's spine. Vampires are real. Demonstrably, yes. And you're what, a regular vampire? Or is there something special about you that explains the whole buying an apothecary on a whim thing? Dorian's lips quirked. I am the vampire king of the Eastern Territories. I rule over approximately 15,000 of my kind, spanning from here to the Atlantic coast. And yes, that does explain the resources at my disposal. Aria stared at him. The vampire king. Of course, because this situation wasn't insane enough already. I've made a deal with the vampire king, she said to herself. My mother's going to kill me if you don't kill me first. I have no intention of killing you. Dorian sounded almost offended. Quite the opposite. I intend to keep you very safe. Why? Because you're mine now, for a month at least, and I protect what's mine. The possessiveness in his voice should have frightened her. Instead, it sent a strange shiver through her that had nothing to do with fear. The car pulled up in front of Aria's shabby apartment building, looking absurdly out of place among the cracked pavement and graffitied walls. Dorian examined the building with obvious distaste. You live here? Not all of us can afford castles, Aria shot back, defensive despite herself. Clearly. Dorian opened his door before the driver could come around. Come, pack what you need, quickly. Aria's apartment was on the 3rd floor, accessible only by a stairwell that smelled like cigarettes and despair. She was acutely aware of Dorian behind her as she climbed, his presence making the dingy hallway feel even smaller. Inside her apartment, really just a studio with a bathroom so small she could barely turn around, she grabbed a duffel bag and started throwing in clothes. She didn't have much. A few pairs of jeans, some shirts, underwear, her toothbrush, and the single cosmetics bag that held her meager collection of drugstore makeup. Dorian stood in the center of the room, looking around with an expression of carefully controlled distaste. His presence made the space look even more pathetic than it already was. This is everything? He asked as she zipped the bag. I sold most of my stuff, Aria said defensively, trying to raise money for the medicine. Something softened in Dorian's expression. You truly would have done anything for her. She's my mother. She raised me alone after my father died, worked herself half to death to give me a decent life. This is the least I can do. The least you can do is sell yourself to a vampire king for a month? Dorian's tone was dry. Aria met his eyes squarely. If that's what it takes? Yes. For a moment, they stood there in her tiny apartment, staring at each other. Then Dorian crossed the space between them in 2 fluid strides and took her bag from her nerveless fingers. Come, he said softly. Let me show you what your sacrifice has earned. The drive from Aria's apartment to Dorian's home took nearly an hour, winding through the city and out into an area Aria had never visited. Old money territory, where the streets were lined with trees and the houses sat far back from the road, hidden behind gates and walls. Dorian's estate put even those mansions to shame. The car passed through iron gates that looked like they belonged in a Gothic cathedral, down a tree-lined drive that went on for what felt like miles. When the house finally came into view, Aria's breath caught. It was a castle, an actual, honest-to-God castle, all dark stone and soaring towers, like something transported straight from medieval Europe and plopped down in the middle of the modern world. You live here? Aria breathed. I've lived in many places over the centuries, Dorian said. This is merely my current residence. Do you like it? Like it? It was terrifying and beautiful and completely overwhelming. It's incredible. Good. The car stopped in front of massive wooden doors that looked like they could withstand a siege. You'll be staying in the East Wing. Your rooms have been prepared. Rooms. Plural. Aria followed Dorian through doors that opened at their approach servants, she realized, dressed in black and moving with the same inhuman grace as Dorian himself. More vampires. The interior of the castle matched the exterior's Gothic grandeur. Soaring ceilings, dark wood paneling, tapestries that looked genuinely medieval. But there were modern touches, too subtle lighting, contemporary furniture mixed with the antiques, technology discreetly integrated into the ancient architecture. Dorian led her through a maze of corridors, up a grand staircase, and finally through a set of double doors into a suite of rooms that were larger than her entire apartment. The bedroom alone was massive, dominated by a 4-poster bed that could have slept 6 people. Floor-to-ceiling windows looked out over manicured gardens that seemed to stretch forever. There was a sitting area with a fireplace, a bathroom with a tub that was practically a small pool, and a walk-in closet that was currently empty except for a few items hanging on one side. "I took the liberty of having some clothing prepared for you," Dorian said, gesturing to the closet. "Based on your measurements, if anything doesn't fit or suit your taste, simply inform the staff and they'll have it replaced." Aria walked to the closet, running her hand over fabric that felt more expensive than anything she'd ever owned. Dresses, casual wear, even pajamas that looked like they cost more than a car payment. "This is too much," she said. "This is the bare minimum." Dorian moved to stand beside her, close enough that she could feel the unnatural coolness radiating from his skin. "You're under my protection now, Aria. That means you'll be clothed, fed, and housed according to your station." "My station? I'm a broke college dropout who works 3 minimum wage jobs." "You're the guest of the Vampire King," Dorian corrected. "That elevates your station considerably." Aria turned to look at him, studying his perfect, inhuman features. "Why are you really doing this? And don't tell me it's because I interest you. People don't buy entire businesses for people who interest them." Dorian reached out slowly, giving her time to move away, and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. His fingers were cool against her skin. "Don't they?" he murmured. "Perhaps you simply haven't met the right kind of people, or the right kind of monster." Aria's heart was hammering, but she forced herself not to step back. "Are you a monster? Would you believe me if I said no? Would you believe me if I said I wasn't terrified?" Dorian's expression shifted into something that might have been sadness. "I don't want you to be afraid of me, Aria. I want quite the opposite, actually." "Then what do you want?" He dropped his hand, stepping back to give her space. "I want you to stay. Not because you have to for your mother's sake. Though I understand that's why you're here now. I want you to choose to stay. To want to stay." "In a month? That's impossible." "Is it?" Dorian tilted his head. "I have a month to convince you that I'm worth staying for, that this life is worth staying for. That seems like a fair challenge to me. And if you fail? If I leave after the month is up? Then your mother's medication continues regardless. I'm many things, Aria, but I'm not cruel. I won't punish her for your choices." Aria searched his face for any sign of deception and found none, which didn't mean much. He was probably centuries old and had had plenty of time to perfect lying, but something in his expression seemed genuine. "Okay," she said finally. 1 month, but I have rules." Dorian's lips curved into a real smile this time, and Aria's breath caught at the sight of it. Beautiful didn't even begin to cover it. "I would expect nothing less." "Name them." "First, I want to see my mother, regularly. I need to know she's really getting the medication and that she's okay." "Agreed. I'll have a car available to take you to the hospital whenever you wish. Or I'll accompany you myself, if you prefer." "Second, you don't touch me without permission. No drinking my blood, no vampire mind control, none of that." "I don't need to use compulsion on humans," Dorian said mildly. "But yes, agreed. I won't touch you without your explicit consent." "Third, I want to know what I'm getting into. If I'm going to be here for a month, I need to understand your world, the vampire world, all of it." Dorian studied her for a long moment. "That's a dangerous request, Aria. Knowledge of our kind has consequences. Once you know certain things, you can't unknow them. I'm already living in a vampire castle with the Vampire King. I think I'm past the point of being able to unknow things." "Fair enough," Dorian inclined his head. "Then yes, I'll teach you about my world, though I reserve the right to withhold certain information that could put you in danger." "I can live with that." Aria took a deep breath. "When can I see my mother?" "Now, if you wish. Though it's nearly dawn and I'll need to remain here. I'll send a car and a guard." "A guard?" "You're under my protection," Dorian reminded her. "That means you're also a potential target for my enemies. I won't risk you going out unprotected." Aria hadn't thought of that. Of course the Vampire King would have enemies. Of course being associated with him would put her in danger. "What have I gotten myself into?" she muttered. Dorian's hand was gentle as he tipped her chin up to meet his eyes. "Something extraordinary if you'll let it be. I promise you that much, at least." Then he was gone, moving with that impossible vampire speed, leaving Aria alone in her beautiful, terrifying new prison. The hospital visit was surreal. Aria sat beside her mother's bed, watching Aria Castellan's color slowly return as the medication began to work its miracle. The hospital staff were baffled, but thrilled apparently. A very generous anonymous donor had not only paid for all of Elena's current medical expenses, but had set up a trust to cover her care for life. Elena kept asking questions Aria couldn't answer. Who was the donor? Why would anyone do this? How had Aria managed it? Aria deflected, lied, made vague statements about charity organizations and lucky coincidences. Her mother was too weak to press too hard, and for that, Aria was grateful. "You look tired, sweetheart," Elena said, her thin hand squeezing Aria's. "Are you taking care of yourself?" "I'm fine, Mom. Better than fine, actually. I'm staying with a friend for a while. Nice place, good food. You don't have to worry about me." "I always worry about you. That's my job." Aria smiled, blinking back tears. "Well, your job right now is to focus on getting better. Let me do the worrying for both of us." She stayed until Elena fell asleep, then made her way back to the car where Dorian's guard, a female vampire named Seraphine with white hair in an intricate braid and eyes like molten gold, waited with patient stillness. The drive back to the estate was quiet. Aria watched the sun rise through tinted windows, noticing how Seraphine relaxed slightly once they pulled into the castle's underground garage. "Lord Somnus will be resting now," Seraphine said as she escorted Aria back to her rooms. "He sleeps during the day, as do most of our kind. But if you need anything, the human staff are available, and I'll be nearby if there's an emergency." "Human staff?" "Not everyone who works for Lord Somnus is a vampire. Many are humans who've chosen to serve our kind. They're well compensated and protected." Seraphine's golden eyes studied her. "You're safe here, Miss Castellan. Lord Somnus has made that very clear to everyone in this household." "And if he hadn't? Would I be safe?" Seraphine's smile was sharp, showing teeth that were definitely pointed. "Let's just say it's fortunate he did." Alone in her rooms again, Aria tried to sleep but couldn't. Her mind was racing, processing everything that had happened in the last 12 hours. Yesterday morning, she'd been desperate and hopeless. Now she was living in a castle, her mother was receiving life-saving medication, and she'd somehow caught the attention of the Vampire King. It was insane. All of it. But her mother was going to live. That was what mattered. That was worth a month of her life, worth dealing with vampires and dangers she didn't fully understand yet, worth even the growing, terrifying attraction she felt toward a man who wasn't even human, because she was attracted to Dorian. That was the most dangerous truth of all. The first week passed in a strange blur. Aria fell into a routine of sorts, sleeping during the day when Dorian and most of the vampire staff were resting, waking in the late afternoon, having dinner with Dorian in a formal dining room that could have seated 50 people, then spending the evening learning about the vampire world. Dorian was a patient teacher. He explained the hierarchy of vampire society, kings and queens who ruled territories, lords and ladies who governed smaller regions, and common vampires who lived according to laws as complex as any human legal system. He told her about the weaknesses sunlight, which could burn them but not immediately kill them unless the exposure was prolonged. Wooden stakes through the heart, which worked mostly because stabbing anyone through the heart tended to be fatal. Beheading, fire, complete exsanguination. "We're not invincible," Dorian said one evening as they sat in his private study, a room lined with books in dozens of languages. "We're simply very, very hard to kill." "And the whole drinking blood thing?" Aria asked, curled up in a leather chair that was probably older than her great-grandmother. "Necessary for survival. We can eat regular food for pleasure, but we need blood to maintain our strength and immortality." Dorian swirled the wine in his glass, actual wine, which apparently vampires could drink without issue. "We have blood banks, donors, legal, ethical sources. But you could just take it from anyone. We could, some do. They don't last long once they're caught. Dorian's expression went hard. I don't tolerate that kind of behavior in my territory. Humans are not prey. They're... He paused, looking at her. Important. Because you need us for blood? Because you're people. Fragile, mortal, beautiful people who deserve to live their brief lives without fear. His voice softened. Your mother is human. You love her desperately. Do you think I can't understand that? Can't value human life because I recognize its worth? Aria felt something shift in her chest. I didn't mean... I know what you meant, and you're right to be cautious. Not all vampires feel as I do. Some see humans as nothing more than food sources. Others are simply indifferent. Dorian set down his glass and leaned forward. But I've lived for over 800 years, Aria. I've seen empires rise and fall. I've watched humans create art, music, literature that moves me still. I've seen the depths of human cruelty and the heights of human compassion. You fascinate me. Your entire species. Always have. Is that why you wanted me to stay? Because I'm fascinating? I wanted you to stay because you remind me why I fell in love with humanity in the first place. Dorian's crimson eyes seemed to glow in the firelight. Your devotion to your mother, your refusal to give up even when the situation was hopeless, the way you looked at me in that apothecary, terrified but defiant. You were willing to make a deal with a monster to save someone you loved. That's beautiful, Aria. That's worth protecting. Aria's throat felt tight. You keep saying you're a monster. I am. I'm starting to think you're wrong about that. Dorian went very still. Then he stood, moving to the window that overlooked his dark gardens. Don't make me into something I'm not. I've killed Aria. Many times. I've made hard decisions that cost lives. I've done things you'd find horrifying if you knew the details. Were they necessary? The things you did? I believed they were at the time. And now? Now I think necessity is a word we use to justify the unjustifiable. Dorian's reflection in the window looked haunted. I'm not a good man. I'm barely a man at all anymore. Don't forget that. Aria stood, crossing to stand beside him. He tensed as she approached, but didn't move away. I don't think you're as bad as you want me to believe, she said quietly. I think you're trying to scare me away before I get too close. Perhaps you should be scared. Perhaps. Aria met his eyes in the reflection. But I'm still here. They stood there in silence for a long moment, and Aria could have sworn she felt the weight of all those centuries pressing down on him. The loneliness of living for so long, watching everyone you cared about age and die while you remained unchanging. Tell me about your life, Dorian said suddenly. Before all this, who were you when you weren't desperately trying to save your mother? So Aria told him. About growing up with her mother in a tiny apartment much like the one he'd seen. About her father dying when she was 6, a construction accident that had left them with nothing. About her mother working 2 jobs to pay for Aria's education, sacrificing everything so Aria could go to college. I was studying art history, she said with a rueful laugh. Completely impractical, but I loved it. Loved learning about the artists, the movements, the way art reflected and shaped culture. I had to drop out when Mom got sick, obviously. Couldn't afford the tuition, and I needed to work more to cover her medical bills even before it got really bad. You sacrificed your dreams for her. She sacrificed everything for me first. It was only fair. Dorian turned to look at her directly. The gallery in the south wing. Have you explored it yet? Aria shook her head. I didn't want to intrude. You're my guest. Nothing in this house is off limits to you. He offered his arm. Come, let me show you something you might appreciate. The gallery was breathtaking. Paintings lined the walls, originals that Aria recognized from textbooks and museum catalogs. A Caravaggio, 2 Vermeers, what looked like an early Rembrandt. Art worth millions just casually displayed in a private hallway. These are... Aria couldn't finish the sentence. How do you have these? I've been collecting for a very long time. Some I purchased, others were gifts from the artists themselves. Dorian smiled at her expression. I knew Caravaggio briefly. Terrible gambler, brilliant painter. He owed me a debt and I requested a painting rather than money. One of my better decisions. Aria moved from painting to painting in a daze. This was history, Real, tangible history, casually displayed in a vampire's home. This is incredible. I'm glad you think so. The collection is rather wasted on me lately. I've seen these pieces so many times they've lost their impact. But watching you see them for the first time... Dorian moved to stand beside her. That's beautiful. Aria realized she was crying, actual tears running down her face as she stared at a painting she'd written a paper about in college, never dreaming she'd see the original. I'm sorry, she said, wiping at her eyes. This is stupid. It's not stupid. Dorian's voice was gentle. Art should move us. That's its purpose, and you understand that better than most. He reached out slowly, telegraphing the movement, and wiped a tear from her cheek with his thumb. His touch was cool but not unpleasant, and Aria found herself leaning into it without thinking. Aria, he said softly, and her name in his accented voice sent shivers down her spine. Yes? May I kiss you? The question hung in the air between them. Aria knew she should say no. This was dangerous, getting involved with him. He was a vampire, a king, something other and unknowable. This was supposed to be a business arrangement, not yes, she heard herself say. Dorian's kiss was gentle despite his inhuman strength, cool lips against hers, careful and controlled, as if he was afraid she might shatter. One hand cupped her face, while the other remained at his side, giving her space to pull away if she wanted. She didn't want to. Aria kissed him back, rising on her toes to reach him better, her hands finding his chest. His heart didn't beat. She could feel that, the stillness where there should have been a pulse, but his lips moved against hers with definite hunger, definite want, and when she opened her mouth to him, his control slipped just slightly. The kiss deepened. Dorian's arm came around her waist, pulling her closer, and Aria felt the sharp points of his fangs against her lower lip. Not biting, just there, a reminder of what he was. It should have terrified her. It didn't. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, well, Aria was breathing hard. Dorian didn't technically need to breathe. They stared at each other in the gallery's soft lighting. That was, Aria started. A mistake? Dorian's expression was carefully neutral. I was going to say, incredible. Aria touched her lips, still tingling from the kiss. But maybe also a mistake. I don't know. This is all so complicated. Yes. Dorian stepped back, giving her space, though his eyes tracked her every movement. Perhaps we should retire for the evening. It's nearly dawn. Aria nodded, suddenly exhausted. The emotional whiplash of the past week was catching up with her. Dorian walked her back to her rooms in silence. At her door, he paused. Aria, what happened tonight? I don't want you to think I expect anything from you. The arrangement we made stands as it is. This doesn't change that. What if I wanted to change? The words were out before Aria could stop them. Dorian's eyes widened slightly the first time she'd seen him look genuinely surprised. Do you? I don't know. Maybe. Is that crazy? Probably. His lips quirked into a small smile. But I find I don't care. Sleep well, Aria. He was gone before she could respond, moving with that impossible speed, leaving her alone with her racing thoughts and the memory of his lips on hers. The second week brought complications. Aria woke one evening to find Seraphine waiting outside her rooms, her expression grim. Lord Somnus requests your presence in the council chamber immediately. What's wrong? There's been a challenge to his claim on you. You need to be there. Aria dressed quickly, her heart pounding, and followed Seraphine through the castle to a room she hadn't seen before. It was massive, with a long table surrounded by chairs, and currently filled with vampires. All of them turned to look at her as she entered. Dorian stood at the head of the table, looking every inch the king. His expression was cold in a way Aria hadn't seen before, and his eyes held a dangerous light. Aria, he said, his voice cutting through the sudden silence. Come here. She moved to his side on instinct, and his hand found the small of her back, a possessive gesture that wasn't lost on anyone in the room. This is Aria Castellan, Dorian announced. She is under my personal protection. Any threat to her is a threat to me. Is that clear? A vampire across the table, pale skin, white hair worn short, eyes like chips of ice, smiled coldly. Of course, my lord. We would never dream of threatening your pet. Aria bristled at the word, but Dorian's hand pressed slightly against her back, a warning to stay quiet. Aria is my guest, not my pet, Dorian said softly, and somehow that made it more menacing. Choose your words more carefully, Vasile. The vampire Vasile inclined his head mockingly. My apologies. I merely question the wisdom of bringing a human into our world so completely. She knows too much about us now. What's to stop her from exposing us when her month is up? Me, Dorian said flatly. I'm what stops that. And the fact that Aria is not foolish enough to start a war between species. Are you certain of that? Another vampire spoke up, this one female with hair like spun silver and a face that could have been carved from ice. Humans are unpredictable, emotional. She could become a liability. Then I will handle that liability if it arises. Dorian's voice had gone even colder. But I did not summon you here to debate my decisions regarding Aria. I summoned you to make clear that she is not to be touched, threatened, or harassed in any way. You will treat her with the same respect you would show any visiting dignitary. Is that understood? A chorus of reluctant agreements went around the table. Good. You're dismissed. The vampires filed out, though more than a few shot Aria looks that ranged from curious to hostile. When the room was empty except for Dorian, Aria, and Seraphine standing guard at the door, Aria let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. What was that about? My council is concerned that I'm showing favoritism to a human. They think it makes me look weak. Dorian's hand was still on her back, warm despite his naturally cool temperature. They're not entirely wrong. I don't want to cause problems for you. You're not causing anything. They're simply resistant to change. And you represent a significant change in how I conduct my affairs. He turned her to face him. But I meant what I said. You're under my protection. No one in my territory will harm you. And outside your territory? Dorian's expression went dark. That's a concern I'm working to address. Not all vampire kings are as progressive as I am regarding humans. If word spreads that I've taken a particular interest in you, it could make you a target. So I'm in danger because you kissed me? You're in danger because I care about you. The kiss was simply confirmation of something my people already suspected. Dorian cupped her face gently. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to put you at risk. You didn't. I kissed you back, remember? Aria covered his hand with hers. And I'm not sorry about it. You should be. Getting involved with me is dangerous. Everything about this situation is dangerous. I made peace with that the moment I agreed to your deal. Dorian pulled her into an embrace, and Aria went willingly, pressing her face against his chest. She could hear the absence of a heartbeat, feel the unnatural stillness of his body, but somehow it didn't matter. He felt safe, strong, like nothing could hurt her while she was in his arms. I won't let anything happen to you, he murmured against her hair. I swear it. Aria believed him. The danger came anyway. It was her third week at the estate, and Aria had grown comfortable enough to explore the grounds during the evening hours. She was walking through the gardens with Seraphine a respectful distance behind when she felt the prickling sensation of being watched. She stopped, scanning the perfectly manicured hedges and flower beds. Nothing obvious moved, but the feeling didn't go away. Seraphine? The vampire guard was beside her in an instant, golden eyes scanning the shadows. Get back to the house, now. What's now? Aria ran. She made it maybe 10 feet before something slammed into her from the side, driving her to the ground. Pain exploded through her shoulder as she hit the path, and she looked up to see a vampire she didn't recognize, looming over her. His hair was white like all vampires, but his eyes were a sickly yellow, and his face was twisted with hunger. Pretty little human, he hissed. The king's pet. I wonder if you taste as good as they say. He grabbed her arm, yanking her up, and Aria screamed. His fangs were descending toward her throat when Seraphine tackled him, moving so fast she was just a blur. They fought actual brutal combat that was almost too fast for Aria's eyes to follow. Blood splattered the garden path. Seraphine was strong, but the other vampire was clearly older, more powerful. Aria scrambled backward, her shoulders screaming in pain, trying to get out of the way. She had to find help, Dorian appeared like a thunderstorm given form. One moment the garden was just Seraphine fighting desperately against the intruder. The next, Dorian was there, and the temperature seemed to drop 20 degrees. He grabbed the attacking vampire by the throat and lifted him off the ground with one hand. The stranger clawed at Dorian's arm, but the Vampire King didn't even flinch. "You attacked what is mine," Dorian said, his voice deadly quiet. "In my territory, in my home. She's just a human." Dorian's hand tightened, and the stranger's words cut off with a choking sound. "She is under my protection. You knew that. Which means this wasn't just an attack on her. It was an attack on me. Please, who sent you?" The stranger's eyes darted around wildly, looking for escape that didn't exist. When he didn't answer, Dorian's other hand came up, gripping the vampire's head. "I'll ask once more. Who sent you?" "Vasile," the stranger gasped out. He said if we eliminated the human, you'd stop this madness, stop weakening yourself over a mortal." Dorian's expression went absolutely cold. "I see." Then he twisted, and the sharp crack of the stranger's neck echoed through the garden. Aria watched in horror as the body dropped to the ground, twitching. Not dead vampires were harder to kill than that, but incapacitated. Dorian turned to Seraphine. "Take him to the cells. Keep him alive. I'm not done with him yet." His eyes found Aria, and something in his expression shattered. Aria. She was shaking. Now that the danger was past, her body was finally catching up with what had just happened. She'd almost died. That vampire had been going to drink from her, probably kill her, and if Dorian hadn't arrived when he did, "Aria, let me see." Dorian was kneeling beside her, his hands hovering over her injured shoulder. "May I touch you?" She nodded, not trusting her voice. His fingers were gentle as he examined the damage. "Your shoulder is dislocated. This is going to hurt." "More than it already does?" "Yes, I'm sorry." He braced her, and with one quick movement, shoved the joint back into place. Aria screamed, tears streaming down her face, but the sharp agony faded to a duller throb almost immediately. Dorian gathered her into his arms, lifting her like she weighed nothing. "I'm taking you inside. Seraphine, summon my council, all of them, immediately." The next hour was a blur. Dorian carried Aria to her rooms where a human doctor was already waiting. The shoulder was bandaged, and Aria was given pain medication that made everything feel fuzzy and distant. She was drifting in and out when she heard raised voices from somewhere else in the castle, shouting, a sound that might have been a scream. Then Dorian was back, and there was blood on his white shirt. "Is that yours?" Aria asked muzzily. "No." Dorian sat on the edge of her bed, taking her hand carefully. "How are you feeling?" "Floaty. What happened? I heard yelling." "Vasile won't be a problem anymore." "Did you kill him?" "Yes." Aria knew she should feel something about that. Horror, maybe. Fear. But all she felt was safe. Dorian had protected her, had eliminated the threat. She trusted that he'd had good reason. "I'm sorry," Dorian said quietly. "This is my fault. I should have been more careful, should have anticipated that my council would see you as a weakness to exploit." "Not your fault," Aria squeezed his hand. "You told them I was protected. They chose not to listen. And now they know the consequences of that choice." Dorian's eyes were haunted. "I executed Vasile in front of the entire council, made it clear what happens to anyone who threatens you. It was necessary, but it was also brutal, and I'm sorry you had to hear it. You were protecting me. That doesn't make it right." Aria tugged on his hand, pulling him closer. "Come here." He moved carefully, lying beside her on the massive bed, his body a cool presence against her uninjured side. Aria curled into him despite the pain medication making her movements clumsy. "You're not a monster," she whispered. "You're just trying to keep me safe." "I'm both," Dorian said, "and that's the problem." Aria fell asleep against him, and when she woke the next evening, he was still there, watching over her with eyes that held centuries of loneliness and something that might have been hope. The fourth week was different. After the attack, Dorian became even more protective. He personally escorted Aria anywhere she wanted to go, and when he couldn't be with her, she had no fewer than 3 guards. The castle itself went on high alert. Security tightened to the point where even the staff moved with increased tension. But he was also softer with her, more open, as if the attack had shattered some wall he'd been maintaining. They spent long evenings in the gallery, Dorian telling her stories about the artists he'd known, the historical events he'd witnessed. Aria told him about her dreams for the future, maybe going back to school someday, opening a small art gallery of her own, spending more time with her mother once Elena was fully recovered. "You could do all of that," Dorian said one night. "I could help, fund your education, set you up with a gallery. You wouldn't have to work 3 jobs just to survive." "That would make me your kept woman," Aria pointed out. "Would that be so terrible?" "I don't know. Would it?" Dorian was quiet for a long moment. "I want you to stay, Aria. Not just for the month. I want you to choose this life. Choose me." "As what? Your girlfriend? Your consort? What would that even look like?" "Whatever you want it to look like." Dorian turned to face her fully. "I'm not asking you to become a vampire. I would never do that without your explicit, enthusiastic consent, and even then only after you'd had years to consider it. I'm simply asking you to stay, to give us a real chance. You're immortal. I'm not. Eventually, I'll age and die, and you'll still be here." "I know." The pain in Dorian's voice was palpable. "Believe me, I know. I've thought of little else for the past 3 weeks, but I would rather have you for your natural lifetime than spend another eternity alone." Aria's heart clenched. "Dorian, you don't have to answer now. You still have a week before our month is up. I just wanted you to know that the option is there, that I want you to stay, that I—" He stopped, seeming to struggle with the words. "That I love you." The world seemed to stop. "You love me?" Aria whispered. "That they." "Is that so surprising? You're brilliant, brave, compassionate. You sacrificed everything for your mother without a second thought. You looked at me, a monster, and saw something worth knowing. You kiss me like you're not afraid of these fangs, like you want all of me, not just the parts that seem human." Dorian cupped her face with both hands. "How could I not love you?" Aria felt tears streaming down her face. "I think I love you too, which is insane because it's been less than a month and you're a vampire, and this whole thing is impossible." Dorian kissed her, cutting off her rambling. This kiss was different from their first, deeper, more desperate, like he was trying to pour 800 years of loneliness and longing into the connection between them. Aria kissed him back with everything she had, her hands fisting in his shirt, pulling him closer. His fangs scraped gently against her lip, and she gasped into his mouth. "Aria," he breathed against her lips. "If you want me to stop, don't stop. Please don't stop." They moved together to his chambers larger than hers, dominated by a bed that looked like it belonged in a palace. Dorian laid her down gently, his hands skating over her clothes with reverent care. "Are you sure?" he asked, even as his fingers found the buttons of her shirt. "Once we do this, there's no going back. You'll be mine in every way that matters." "I'm already yours," Aria said, reaching up to pull him down to her. "I think I have been since that first day in the Apothecary." They made love slowly, carefully, Dorian treating her like something precious and breakable. His cool skin against hers was strange, but not unpleasant, and his strength was evident in every controlled movement, every gentle touch. Afterward, they lay tangled together, Aria's head on Dorian's chest, listening to the silence where his heartbeat should be. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now you decide. Stay or go. Choose me or choose your human life." "What if I want both? What if I want you and my mother and my dreams and all of it? Then we figure out how to make that work." Dorian's fingers traced patterns on her bare shoulder. "I told you I want you to be happy. If that means splitting time between this world and yours, we'll make it work. If it means I have to join you in the human world more often, then that's what I'll do. Whatever you need, Aria." "I need you," she whispered. "That's what scares me. I've only known you for 3.5 weeks, and I can't imagine going back to my life without you in it." "Then don't. It's not that simple." "Why not?" Aria sat up, pulling the sheet around herself. "Because my life is complicated. I have my mother to think about, responsibilities, a whole existence that doesn't include vampire kings and castles. I can't just abandon all of that." "I'm not asking you to." Dorian sat up beside her. "I'm asking you to expand your life to include this, include me. And when I get old, when I'm 60 and gray and you still look like this, then I'll love you at 60 and gray the same way I love you now." His voice was fierce. "Do you think I care about aging? I've existed for 8 centuries, Aria. Physical beauty is the least interesting thing about a person after the first 100 years. But your people, your council, Can accept it or leave my territory. I'm the king. I make the rules. Dorian turned her face toward him. Stop looking for reasons this won't work and help me find ways that it will. Aria searched his eyes and found only sincerity, only love, only certainty that this impossible thing between them was worth fighting for. Okay, she said finally. Okay, I'll stay. Not forever, I can't promise that yet, but I'll stay and we'll see where this goes. The smile that broke across Dorian's face was like sunrise, and Aria thought that maybe, just maybe, they could make this work. The final days of the month flew by. Aria spent them settling into a new routine, visiting her mother daily, who was improving dramatically and asking fewer and fewer questions about Aria's mysterious benefactor. Exploring more of Dorian's world, meeting vampires who were cautiously accepting of her presence now that Dorian had made his position clear, and spending every possible moment with Dorian himself. He showed her the vampire court in all its strange glory, the formal functions where centuries-old beings discussed politics and territory with the same petty drama as any human government, the quieter moments in his library where they read together in comfortable silence, the nights in his bed, learning each other's bodies with increasing confidence. On the final night of their agreement, Dorian took Aria to the castle's highest tower. The view was breathtaking. The city lights spread out below them like earthbound stars. I brought you here to show you something, Dorian said, wrapping his arms around her from behind. This is my territory. Every light down there represents someone under my protection, vampire and human alike. This is what I'm responsible for, what I fight for. It's beautiful. It is. But it's also a burden. Being king means making impossible choices. It means being hard when I want to be merciful and ruthless when I want to be kind. It means carrying the weight of thousands of lives and knowing that every decision I make affects all of them. He turned her to face him. If you stay with me, you'll be part of that. You'll be seen as my consort, which means you'll have influence and power, but also responsibility. People will come to you for help, for mercy, for justice. It won't always be easy. I don't need easy, Aria said. I just need honest. And you've been honest with me from the start. Have I? Dorian looked troubled. I manipulated you into coming here. Aria, I saw you desperate and vulnerable, and I used that to get what I wanted. Which was what? Me? Yes. And I got my mother's life saved. And I got you. That doesn't seem like manipulation. That seems like two people finding something they both needed. Dorian pulled her close, pressing his forehead to hers. How did I get so lucky to find you? You bought an apothecary, Aria said with a laugh. Pretty sure that's not luck, that's just having too much money. Best purchase I ever made. They stood there as the night deepened around them, and Aria felt a peace she hadn't known in years. Her mother was safe, she was safe, and she'd found love in the most impossible place, with the most impossible person. I have something for you, Dorian said, pulling back slightly. He drew a small box from his pocket and Aria's heart jumped. Dorian, if that's a ring? It's not yet. I'm 800 years old, Aria, but I'm not foolish enough to propose after 1 month. He opened the box to reveal a pendant on a silver chain. The pendant itself was a deep red stone carved into the shape of a rose. This is a bloodstone. It's been in my family for generations, back when I had a human family. It's a symbol of protection in my culture. Wearing it marks you as under my direct protection. Any vampire who sees it will know you're mine. Yours, Aria repeated softly, if you'll have me. She turned, lifting her hair so he could fasten the necklace. The bloodstone settled just above her heart, warm despite the cool metal chain. How do I look? She asked, turning back. Perfect. Dorian's eyes were bright. Like you belong here, like you were always meant to be mine. Maybe I was. They kissed under the stars, vampire and human, king and college dropout, two impossible people finding their improbable happy ending. 6 months later, Aria stood in her gallery, the one Dorian had helped her open in the city, arranging a new exhibit. It was a collection of works by unknown artists, people who'd never had the chance to show their work because they didn't have connections or money or luck. She was giving them that chance now. The gallery was small but beautiful, located in a building Dorian owned but had put entirely in Aria's name. She ran it herself with help from a small staff, and it was already developing a reputation for discovering new talent. Her mother was healthy now, living in a nice apartment near the gallery, fully recovered and asking only occasionally about Aria's mysterious boyfriend, who Elena had met exactly twice and seemed both charmed and slightly intimidated by. Aria still split her time between the human world and Dorian's, spent days at the gallery, evenings at the castle. It was a strange balance, but it worked. She was learning vampire politics slowly, attending some court functions as Dorian's acknowledged consort, making connections with both vampires and humans who moved in those circles. It wasn't a normal life, but it was hers, and she loved it. The gallery door opened, and Aria looked up to see Dorian entering, moving with his usual preternatural grace. He wore a long coat against the early winter chill, not that he felt the cold, but he liked to blend in among humans, and his white hair was pulled back in a low tail. "How's the setup going?" he asked, pulling her into a kiss that still made her knees weak even after 6 months. "Good. The opening is tomorrow night. Are you sure you can make it?" "I've rearranged my entire schedule. I wouldn't miss this for anything." Dorian surveyed the gallery with obvious pride. "You've done amazing things here, Aria. These artists are lucky to have you championing them. I'm lucky to have the resources to do it." She leaned into him. "Thank you for all of this. You earned it. This is all you." They stood together in the quiet gallery, surrounded by art and possibility. Aria touched the bloodstone pendant she never took off, feeling its familiar weight. "I love you," she said. "I love you too." Dorian's arms tightened around her. "For however long we have, whether that's 50 years or 500. 50 years sounds good for now. Ask me about 500 later." He laughed, the sound rich and genuine, and Aria thought about how much had changed since that desperate day in the Apothecary. How she'd begged a stranger to help her, and he'd bought the whole building just to get her attention. How she'd been terrified and hopeless, and now she was neither. How she'd found love in the most unexpected place, with the most unexpected person. The month they'd agreed to had turned into 6 months, and Aria knew it would turn into years, maybe a lifetime. Maybe even longer if she ever decided to take Dorian up on his standing offer to turn her, though that was a decision she wasn't ready to make yet. But she had time. That was the beautiful thing. They had time. The gallery opening was a success. Aria stood beside Dorian, watching wealthy patrons examine the art, listening to critics praise the fresh perspective and raw talent on display. Several pieces sold before the night was half over, and the artists themselves were glowing with pride and excitement. Aria Castellan stood near the back, healthy and beaming, telling anyone who would listen that her daughter had organized all of this. Dorian's guards were stationed discreetly around the space. Seraphine had become something of a friend to Aria over the past months, and everything felt perfect. "Thank you," Aria whispered to Dorian as they watched a young painter explain her work to an interested buyer. "For giving me this. For giving me everything." "You gave me something far more valuable," Dorian replied. "You gave me a reason to care about the future again. After centuries of existing, you made me want to live." They kissed, right there in the middle of Aria's gallery, vampire king and human artist, and Aria felt the rightness of it down to her bones. This was where she belonged. Here, in this space between two worlds, bridging the gap between human and vampire, mortality and immortality, ordinary and extraordinary. She'd begged a vampire king to buy her mother's medicine, and he'd bought the whole apothecary. He'd bought her a future, a life, a love that transcended every boundary she'd thought existed. And in return, she'd given him her heart. It seemed like a fair trade. The weeks turned into months, and the months began to stretch into a year. Aria's gallery flourished, becoming a known destination for serious art collectors and casual enthusiasts alike. Her mother fully recovered, eventually accepting that Aria's relationship with Dorian was serious and permanent, even if she didn't fully understand the supernatural elements that remained carefully hidden from her. Dorian's court grew to accept Aria's presence. Some vampires remained skeptical of a human consort, but none dared challenge Dorian's choice openly. Not after what had happened to Vasile. The Vampire King's protection was absolute, and Aria learned to move through both worlds with increasing confidence. On the anniversary of their first meeting, Dorian took Aria back to the apothecary he'd purchased. It had been transformed into a community clinic, offering free medications to those who couldn't afford them, funded entirely by Dorian's seemingly endless resources. "I wanted you to see this," he said as they stood in what had once been the main shop floor. Now it was a modern medical facility, staffed by both human doctors and vampire healers who specialized in human medicine. "You inspired this. Your desperation that day, your love for your mother, it reminded me that power should be used to help, not just to rule." Aria watched a mother leave with medication for her sick child, the relief on her face so familiar it made Aria's chest tight. "You're doing this for free?" she asked. "Not all vampires are heartless. Some of us remember what it was like to be human and vulnerable." Dorian took her hand. "And some of us are inspired by exceptional humans who remind us why protecting your kind matters. I'm not exceptional. You are to me." That night, back at the castle, Dorian led Aria to a part of the estate she'd never seen before. A private garden hidden behind high walls where night-blooming flowers released their perfume into the darkness. In the center was a fountain, its water sparkling in the moonlight, and beside the fountain, Dorian knelt. "I told you I wouldn't propose after just 1 month," he said, pulling out a ring box. "It's been a year now. Long enough to know that what I feel isn't infatuation or a whim. Long enough to be certain that I want to spend whatever time we have, whether that's decades or centuries, by your side." Aria's hands flew to her mouth, tears already forming. "Aria Castellan, will you marry me? Will you be my wife, my partner, my reason for existing in this long, often lonely immortality? I can't promise you forever you're human, and that means our time is finite unless you choose otherwise. But I can promise you that every day we have, I will love you with everything I am." "Yes," Aria breathed. "Yes, of course, yes." The ring was perfect, a bloodstone surrounded by diamonds, matching the pendant she still wore. Dorian slipped it onto her finger and stood, pulling her into a kiss that tasted like promises and forever. "I love you," she said against his lips. "I love you so much it terrifies me sometimes." "Love should terrify you," Dorian replied. "It means you have something to lose, something worth protecting." They made love in the secret garden under the stars and moon, and Aria thought that a year ago she'd been desperate and hopeless, willing to do anything to save her mother. Now she was here, engaged to a vampire king, living a life she never could have imagined. Funny how quickly everything could change. The wedding was a blend of human and vampire traditions. Aria Castellan walked her daughter down an aisle lined with flowers that bloomed only at night. Vampire nobility mingled with Aria's small circle of human friends, everyone sworn to secrecy about the true nature of half the guests. Dorian stood at the altar in all black, his white hair loose around his shoulders, looking like some ancient god of darkness and beauty. When Aria appeared in her dress simple but elegant, chosen more for meaning than show, his expression softened into something that took her breath away. They exchanged vows as the sun set, the timing deliberate so that Dorian could stand in the last rays of daylight without discomfort. A symbol, he'd said, of his willingness to endure difficulty for her sake. "I promise to protect you," Dorian said, his crimson eyes locked on hers. "To cherish you for however long we have, to honor your humanity even as I share my immortality with you, to love you in this life and whatever comes after." "I promise to stand beside you," Aria replied, her voice steady despite her tears. "To bridge the worlds we come from, to remind you of your humanity even when you feel most monstrous, to love you for exactly who and what you are, fangs and all." They sealed their vows with a kiss, and the assembled guests, vampire and human alike, erupted in applause. Aria Castellan became Aria Somnus, and the impossible became reality. The reception was held in the castle's grand ballroom, a space that could have held hundreds but was kept deliberately intimate. Aria danced with her mother, with Seraphine, who had become her closest friend among the vampires, and finally with Dorian, who moved with the grace of centuries of practice. "Happy?" he murmured against her ear. Deliriously. "Good. Because you're stuck with me now. I can think of worse fates." They swayed together as music played a mix of modern songs and ancient melodies that Dorian had known in his youth. Aria rested her head on his chest, listening to the silence where a heartbeat should be, and felt utterly at peace. Later, Much later, when the guests had departed and they were alone in Dorian's chambers, Aria asked the question that had been growing in her mind for months. What if I wanted forever? Really forever? Dorian, who had been removing his formal jacket, froze. What if I wanted you to turn me? Eventually, not now, but someday, what would that look like? He crossed to her slowly, taking her hands in his. Are you certain you want to discuss this? Becoming a vampire is not a decision to make lightly. I know, that's why I'm not asking you to do it now, but I want to know what it would mean, what I'd be giving up, what I'd be gaining. Dorian was quiet for a long moment, clearly organizing his thoughts. Then he led her to sit on the bed, keeping her hands in his. You would give up daylight, he said. The sun would become your enemy. You'd burn in minutes of direct exposure, die in less than an hour. You'd give up aging, which sounds like a gift but means watching everyone you know who stays human grow old and die while you remain unchanged. You'd give up normal food as sustenance. You'd need blood to survive, though you could still enjoy regular meals for pleasure. And what would I gain? Strength, speed, senses far beyond human capability, centuries, possibly millennia of life if you're careful. The ability to stand beside me as an equal, not just in sentiment, but in physical capability. His thumbs traced circles on her palms. You'd gain immortality, Aria, but you'd lose your humanity. It's not a trait everyone should make. But some people should. Some people find that what they gain is worth more than what they lose. Only you can decide if you're one of them. Aria thought about it, really thought about it. A life that stretched on for centuries, never having to worry about Dorian outliving her by hundreds of years, the strength to truly protect herself in the dangerous world she'd married into, but also never seeing the sunrise again, watching her mother age and die while she remained young, needing to drink blood to survive, becoming something other than human, something that many would consider monstrous. I don't know yet, she said honestly. Can I have time to decide? You can have all the time you need. Years if necessary, decades. I'll love you human or vampire, Aria. The choice is entirely yours, and I'll support whatever you decide. She kissed him, grateful for his patience, his understanding, his willingness to give her this choice rather than making it for her. Thank you. For what? For loving me enough to let me stay human. For not pushing me to become something I'm not ready to be. I fell in love with Aria Castellan, human woman with a fierce heart and an unbreakable will. If you choose to become Aria Somnus, vampire queen, I'll love that version of you too. But I won't love you more for it. You're already perfect to me. They made love with tender intensity, and Aria thought that whether she stayed human or eventually became a vampire, this was where she belonged, in Dorian's arms, in his bed, in his long and complicated life. 2 years after their wedding, Aria Castellan passed away peacefully in her sleep. She'd had 2 good years of health and happiness, watching her daughter thrive, spending time with her new son-in-law, despite never fully understanding their unusual relationship. Aria mourned deeply, but without the desperate edge she'd felt when her mother was first dying. Elena had lived well, died peacefully, and left knowing her daughter was loved and cared for. At the funeral, Dorian stood beside Aria, his hand a steady presence on the small of her back. He couldn't enter the church holy ground, had some truth to it in vampire lore, but he waited just outside, and when Aria emerged after the service, he was there to catch her as she collapsed into sobs. She's gone, Aria wept into his chest. She's really gone. I know, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I thought I was prepared. She had those 2 good years because of you, and I thought that would make it easier, but it doesn't. It hurts so much. Dorian held her through the grief, steady and patient, as he'd held her through everything else. When the worst of the tears subsided, he wiped her face gently with his handkerchief. Your mother loved you very much, he said. She told me so the last time I saw her. She said she was grateful that you'd found someone who cherished you the way you deserved. When did she tell you that? Last week. I visited her in the hospital just briefly during the evening. We talked about you, about how proud she was of everything you'd accomplished. Dorian smiled softly. She made me promise to take care of you. I told her I'd been doing that already and had no intention of stopping. Fresh tears spilled down Aria's cheeks. I didn't know you visited her. She asked me to come, said she wanted to look me in the eye one more time and make sure I understood how precious you were." His crimson eyes were gentle. I assured her I understood completely. Aria clung to him, grateful beyond words that her mother had had that closure, that Elena had died, knowing Aria was truly loved and protected. In the weeks after the funeral, Aria found herself thinking more seriously about Dorian's offer of immortality. Without her mother anchoring her to her human life, the pull toward Dorian's world grew stronger. But she still wasn't certain. "I'm afraid," she admitted one night as they lay together in the darkness. "What if I become a vampire and I hate it? What if I lose something essential about myself and can't get it back?" "Those are valid fears," Dorian said. "The transformation isn't easy. It's painful, excruciating, actually. And when you wake up changed, the world is different. Sounds are louder, colors are more vivid, and you can hear heartbeats from across a room. It's overwhelming. You're not really selling it." He smiled slightly. "I'm being honest. But there are beautiful aspects, too. The first time you move at full vampire speed, it feels like flying. The first time you realize you're strong enough to protect yourself against almost any threat that's powerful. And knowing you have centuries ahead to learn, grow, experience things, that's a gift, Aria. A real gift. But is it a gift I want? Only you can answer that." Aria wrestled with the decision for months. She spoke with other vampires, asking about their transformations. Seraphine told her it was the best decision she'd ever made. Another vampire, an older woman named Morgana, said she still missed the sun after 300 years. Everyone's experience was different. There was no right answer, no guarantee that Aria would love or hate immortality. In the end, it came down to a simple question. Did she want to spend a human lifetime with Dorian, or did she want to spend several lifetimes with him? When she finally made her decision, 3 years after their wedding, she was certain. "I want you to turn me," she told Dorian. "I want forever with you, not just 50 or 60 years. I want to see what the world becomes, learn everything there is to learn, be your true partner in every sense." Dorian's expression was carefully neutral. "Are you absolutely certain? Once it's done, there's no going back." "I'm certain. I've thought about nothing else for months. I'm ready." "Then we'll do it properly. There's a ritual, a ceremony for willing transformations. It's not just a bite in the dark. It's a formal process overseen by the vampire elders to ensure everything is done correctly and ethically." The ceremony was scheduled for the next new moon, giving Aria time to prepare. She settled her human affairs, transferred the gallery to a trusted manager, ensured her mother's estate was properly handled, said goodbye to the few human friends who knew the truth about what she was about to become. On the night of the new moon, Aria stood in the castle's ritual chamber, surrounded by vampire elders and Dorian's court. She wore a simple white dress, symbolic of her current mortality. Dorian stood before her in formal robes that made him look even more regal than usual. His face was serious, but his eyes held warmth and love. "Aria Somnus," he said formally, "you come before this court of your own free will, seeking transformation into our kind. Do you understand that this choice is permanent and irreversible?" "I do." "Do you understand that you will need to feed on human blood to survive, and that you will be bound by our laws and customs for the rest of your existence?" "I do." "Do you understand that you will become other than human, and that some who knew you may fear or reject you for what you become?" "I understand and accept all of this." Dorian's expression softened slightly. "Then I ask you this final question, not as king, but as your husband. Are you absolutely certain this is what you want?" Aria met his crimson eyes without hesitation. "I've never been more certain of anything. I want this. I want forever with you." He nodded, and the elders began their chanting in a language Aria didn't recognize. The ritual was complex, involving symbols drawn in blood on the stone floor, candles arranged in specific patterns, and words of power that seemed to make the air itself vibrate. Finally, Dorian approached her, and the chamber fell silent. "This will hurt," he said softly, for her ears alone. "I'm sorry for that." "I know. I trust you." He kissed her forehead, then her lips, then trailed kisses down to her throat. Aria felt his fangs extend, felt the sharp points press against her skin. Then he bit down, and the world exploded into pain. It It was like fire in her veins, burning from the bite wound outward through her entire body. Aria screamed, unable to help herself, and felt Dorian's arms come around her, supporting her as her legs gave out. He drank deeply, taking her blood until her vision began to fade. Right at the edge of death, when Aria could feel herself slipping away, Dorian stopped. He bit his own wrist and pressed it to her mouth. "Drink," he commanded. "Drink and be reborn." His blood was strange cold and thick and tasting of copper and something indefinable. Aria drank because she had no choice, because her body demanded it, because Dorian's voice compelled her to. The world went dark. When Aria woke, everything was different. She could hear the heartbeats of every human in the castle, could smell their blood pumping through their veins. The room was brighter somehow, despite being underground, and she could make out details in the shadows that should have been invisible. She sat up, and the movement was too fast, vampire, fast. She was across the room before she meant to be, and Dorian was there instantly, catching her. "Easy," he said. "Your body is still adjusting. You need to relearn movement, relearn control." Aria looked down at her hands and saw them pale, not quite as white as Dorian's yet, but getting there. When she touched her hair, she felt it changing, the color leaching out strand by strand until it was white as snow. "What happened to me?" Her voice sounded different, clearer somehow. "You died," Dorian said simply, "and you were reborn as one of us. Welcome to immortality, my love." The first months of vampire life were challenging. Aria had to relearn basic motor control, had to get used to the constant hunger for blood, had to adjust to a nocturnal schedule when she'd spent her entire human life appreciating daylight. But there were wonders too. The first time she moved at full vampire speed, racing through the castle gardens faster than the eye could follow, she laughed with pure joy. The first time she lifted something that would have taken 3 strong men to move, she marveled at her own strength. And when Dorian took her hunting, ethical hunting, feeding from willing donors who were compensated and cared for, she understood the intimacy of the act, the connection between vampire and human. "I don't regret it," she told Dorian one evening as they walked through the city at night, moving too fast for human eyes to really register them. "Becoming this, becoming like you. I thought I might, but I don't." "I'm glad." Dorian laced his fingers through hers. "Though I would have loved you regardless. I know, that's why I chose this. Because you gave me the choice. You didn't demand it or manipulate me into it. You let me decide on my own terms." They stopped on a rooftop overlooking the city, their city, since Aria was now officially recognized as Dorian's queen, co-ruler of the Eastern Territories. It was a responsibility she was still learning to handle, but with Dorian's guidance and her own determination, she was managing. "Look at this," Dorian said, gesturing to the lights below. "This is our world now. Centuries to explore it, to shape it, to protect it. What do you want to do first?" Aria thought about it, about all the possibilities that stretched before her now. Time to learn languages, travel the world, master arts and skills that took decades to perfect. Time to make a real difference in both the vampire and human worlds. "I want to expand the clinic," she said, "the one you built from the Apothecary. I want to create a network of them all over our territory. Free medical care for humans who can't afford it, funded by vampire resources. A way to bridge our worlds and make them better for everyone." Dorian's smile was brilliant. "That's ambitious. It would cost a fortune." "You have several fortunes, and I'm your queen now. Don't I get some say in how we spend them?" "You get every say." He pulled her close, kissing her with the passion that hadn't dimmed despite years together. "We'll build your clinics, create your network, change the world if that's what you want." "I want to change it with you. That's all I've ever wanted." They stood on that rooftop, vampire king and vampire queen, human turned immortal and ancient creature finding new purpose, and looked out over their domain. It had started with desperation, a woman begging for medicine she couldn't afford. It had become love, impossible, overwhelming, transformative love between two beings who shouldn't have worked but somehow did. And now it was forever. Aria Somnus, who had once been Aria Castellan, who had sold a month of her life for her mother's medicine and ended up gaining eternity, wrapped her arms around her husband and thought about the strange path that had brought her here. She'd begged the vampire king to buy her mother's medicine. He'd bought the whole apothecary. and in doing so, he'd bought himself a future he'd never dared to hope for. They'd bought each other, really. Traded loneliness for companionship, desperation for hope, mortality for immortality. It was a good trade, the best trade, and they had forever to prove it.